What's up, gang? This is Hoptimus. You've been listening to one of the great new podcasts from Ruminations Radio Network. If you want some more tasty sound vibes, come check out my new podcast, The Retro Futurist Culture, where we talk about alternate timelines, cyberpunk, anime, and other crazy worlds. If that does not strike your fancy, we have plenty of other great shows at ruminationsradionetwork.com.
Be advised, Blue Rose Task Force is filled with secrets and spoilers.
And it's a mystery.
I wish you the best of luck.
Welcome to the Blue Rose Task Force, where we look deeply into Twin Peaks as a whole, one episode at a time, using the full scope of the show Twin Peaks and all its official media. We don't use the word canon, but we consider all official releases important because Lynch and Frost have approved their presence. And we welcome all input into the collective consciousness that is the Twin Peaks community and the wider universe. This podcast is watch-along podcast for those who've seen all of Twin Peaks, including the third season, which we consider as we go along. Today, we are looking at the 6th overall episode of Twin Peaks, Episode 5, often known, depending where you look, as Season 1, Episode 6, Episode 6, or what the German regionalization team named Cooper's Dreams. I'm your host, John. Episode 5 begins with Cooper waking up to singing Icelanders, who continue partying all the way through Cooper's morning coffee. Audrey enlists as his junior detective partner, but he cuts her off, and she has to settle for flirting. Ben scolds Jerry over noise complaints, and they conspire to make the Icelanders sign the Ghostwood deal, then hide newly arrived, still broken Leland from sight. At Jacques' apartment, the lawmen find evidence and a photo of a cabin, while Shelley and Bobby get hot over taking down Leo. Norma and Ed step back again, and Emery Battis learns Audrey is not a child anymore. James tells Donna his maudlin backstory. They enlist Maddie to help them solve Laura's murder. Jacoby breaks down Bobby and learns Laura broke him first. And the lawmen discover the log lady's cabin, where they learn manners, and the log reveals what it knows. Then it's on to Jacques' singing cabin and Waldo the mynah bird. And the party begins at the Great Northern, where Leland's grief becomes a dance craze, and Ben double-crosses Catherine with Josie. Maddie finds cassettes in Laura's bedpost, Leo beats up Hank before he's shot by Shelley, and Cooper returns to yet more singing and a naked Audrey in his bed. So this is a really important episode because it has the first major instance of meeting the log lady. But after watching seasons 1, 2, The Return, and reading all the books, it kind of reframes how we see everything. So now that we've seen all of Twin Peaks from 1990 all the way through 2017, what questions are we left with? The first one is, what can the log lady teach us about the reality of Twin Peaks? How does Cooper operate in this reality? Who is Audrey Horne? What kind of presence is Laura Palmer? And how does Bobby Briggs reveal Laura and himself? Okay, so per usual, we're going to start out by looking at how this episode was made during production. First thing we need to know about episode 5 is it was written completely by Mark Frost, and it was directed by first to Twin Peaks director Lesli Linka Glatter. Up to this point, Lesli Linka Glatter had not been connected to David Lynch as all the other directors from season 1. So she, at this point, had only directed a few episodes of this Spielberg-produced anthology series called Amazing Stories. And she wasn't exactly connected to anybody except that her agent was Tony Krantz, and so was David Lynch and Mark Frost. And she had heard somehow through Krantz that Lynch was making this television show, and Glatter was absolutely impressed by Lynch, and she wanted to get in front of, she wanted to get her work in front of him as much as possible, and really, really, really wanted to work with Lynch. So she kind of pushed what she'd done in front of Tony Krantz, and the meeting was arranged, and it worked out. And I'd say it really worked out because by the end of Twin Peaks, the only director who had directed more episodes of Twin Peaks than Lesli Linka Glatter was Lynch himself by one single episode. Glatter ends up having 5. So this was a match really, really built well. Her mindset through directing, and she said this on the Artisan season 1 DVD commentary from back around 2000. She'd say things like, the comedy, absurdity, it all needs to be played as real, and that's why it works. So she kind of understood the magic balance that Twin Peaks had. In that same DVD commentary, she would talk about how she's exploring the unspoken things that aren't allowed to see the light of day. And one direct quote from there for sure was, it's a world of secrets not allowed to be out in the world. Secrets keep people apart and destroy happiness. Which, essentially that's what James tells Donna in this episode. But one interesting technique that she used in this episode that I don't know if it was just instinctual or what, but every time one of these secrets was kind of explored in an audible or visible way was when lights were turned on. Like we'll see Josie in the shadows with her cigarette and in profile at the end. And when Ben Horne turns the light on, we see it's Josie, and then what's revealed is the secret partnership with Ben. When Maddie creeps down the stairs, she doesn't start talking until she turns on the light in the living room when she's calling Donna, and she reveals about the cassettes and everything. And honestly, that's when Sarah starts calling for Leland too. And then Maddie turns off the light when she's done, and the scene's over. Another time when light really shows up is with Jacoby's office. They focus on before Bobby's scene where he gets completely broken down by Jacoby. We see the lamp with the jaguar on it and the tiki style figurines underneath it. And then there's the swinging lamp that is majorly focused on, and that's when Leo was shot by Shelley, and Shelley understands what the truth of the feelings are compared to when she and Bobby are getting all sexy time about shooting Leo. So yeah, it's like the truth comes out when light is shined. And about the shooting itself, Glatter said that all the directors were around for a month. So we get this real sense of community with everybody because, some were prepping episodes while others were shooting episodes, and others were in post-production doing the editing. And she said, we all kind of became residents of Twin Peaks. Besides the use of lights, Glatter really uses a lot of one-shot scenes here. The most obvious one is when Hank is putting music in the jukebox, and then Maddie walks in and is introducing herself to James and Donna, and then they enlist her, and then it pans over to Hank, who looks all super suspicious, and then it pans back over to the door where Maddie, James, and Donna are leaving, and then in comes Norma and Shelley, and then it gets to the gaslighting of Hank. That's basically one shot. Sure, maybe things are broken up a little bit, but it's implied that it's all just, the camera following this whole thing. And that really hadn't been done the last 2 episodes with Hunter and oh my gosh, and Rathborn. But it comes back here a lot with Glatter. One thing Glatter really did bring in, and maybe there was a kind of a thing with Girl Scouts at the Great Northern, but one of the show conventions, the Great Northern hosting conventions, that was really started here by Glatter, and a lot of the season 2 directors ended up running with this and putting their own conventions in the space. In this case, Glatter brought in the American Indian movement. One interesting post-production note we got from Glatter was that Lynch told her that he loved the shot of the record player in Jacques' cabin, and he wanted her to hold on to that needle shot for a very long time. And when she said that Lynch told her, that was in the editing because we would sit and look at the cuts together. So that's kind of crazy. Like, the fact that Lynch would sit with the directors, or at least some of them. Maybe he gave his notes later on from just written down or whatever. But he actually sat with Glatter for this one, and so he was in the room giving notes, and possibly it was every single one in season 1. You never know. Nobody else really confirmed or denied this. But it's interesting to see that Lynch was there. He was probably doing post production for Wild at Heart at this point, and I know that was in the same building, so it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for him to be able to just walk into another room for a little bit. So, in addition to this being Glatter's first episode, this was also the first script that Mark Frost wrote completely on his own, which is kind of interesting because most people don't really associate him with the Log Lady because it was created by Lynch and Catherine Coulson together, years ago. And yet, this is the thing that really imprints on the audience because up to this point, we've only seen her flicking a light switch on and off in the pilot. It's like she was just this weird, eccentric, wallpaper, essentially. She was just a little trait of the town. And yet here, we learn everything that we're going to learn in her longest scene, for a long time anyway, through Mark Frost's script. And if anybody's read the final dossier, he absolutely has a handle on how to write Margaret Lanterman. But it's just interesting that a lot of people associate her so much with Lynch, yet we all use the dialogue from here by the other co-creator that doesn't get as much credit as he usually should. So some details about the Log Lady here. Per Catherine Coulson, Lynch had an idea how the Log Lady should look. He had a lot of ideas about it. In Mark Altman's Twin Peaks Behind the Scenes that was written back in 1990, right before the Wyndham Earle scenes were shot. Like, this book is crazy. You need to find it if you care at all about Twin Peaks production. The detail in there that really caught my eye was that the log that she carries was the same kind of tree that Lynch's dad had his thesis on back when he was a scientist in the Forest Service. So, like that statue of the gunman in season 3, here's another connection that Lynch brings in to his dad. In Essential Wrapped in Plastic by John Thorne, Catherine Coulson talked to him about the Log Lady as well, and she said he, as in Lynch, he would give me ideas, and then I would ask questions like, "What do you think her husband was like? The love of her life, this fabulous woodsman, and that she was married to for such a short time." So he's always been able to give me the specifics. Which, right there, if you know anything about how Lynch talks to his actors, that is unheard of. Lynch actually tells her details about things that he has figured out. Like, that doesn't sound like anything that I've heard about for Lynch. So, like, this Log Lady character is way more important. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, she gets a in memory of at the end of one of the Twin Peaks season 3 episodes, and the only other people that get that note are the people that were the actor names. So yeah, I kind of think that the Log Lady is a real living, breathing character inside Lynch's mind. And later on in that same Essential Wrapped in Plastic article, Coulson says, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say she personifies the world of Twin Peaks. I don't know what Dale Cooper would say about that. But I do think she knows all the elements of Twin Peaks. She knows the underbelly. So that to me says that the Log Lady knows Twin Peaks more as a whole. And I remember a couple episodes ago where Cooper was talking to Albert about, like these people have decency here. They are good people. Be nice to them essentially. And then he starts talking about real estate and everything. And I really do feel like Dale Cooper right now is only seeing the good in things. It's like he's super gleeful about finding the flesh world and everything. So it's like, like he's living in the positive frequency of Twin Peaks. And he's excited to know that he's on the trail of the darkness in it. So like he kind of knows that the darkness is there and he knows of how to handle darkness, but right now in Twin Peaks he just can't see it. And it makes a lot of sense that Catherine Coulson is kind of calling him out on that, indirectly. But I think there's something there thematically. But before we keep diving into the Log Lady, which we will, the end result of this episode, after it was made and airing on television, it aired on May 10th, 1990, to a good showing. Last week had a ratings bump of 17.4 million, which was a significant bump from the week before, which was great. It probably kept the show alive. And this week is at 17.3 million viewers, which is only a 0.1, and it's only a 0.1 drop, which was great. And honestly, I think that these two episodes in a row being higher ratings than the week before, that probably is what kept ABC deciding to actually renew this and turn it into a series. This week it was led up to with Father Dowling Mysteries again, and it was airing against a show called Falcon Crest, which was I believe it was a spinoff of Dallas. And Falcon Crest was pretty much one of the last of the primetime soaps left. And that's what Twin Peaks was riffing off of. And it's interesting because Twin Peaks beat it in the ratings. It's 1 week away from its final episode, and I mean, as far as I can remember, Dallas was the only one left after this. So Twin Peaks is kind of riffing on this whole genre of television that dominated like the previous 10 years or so, and it's like it's ushering in the fact that that kind of show isn't what television needed anymore. And yeah, I mean Dallas makes it a couple more years, but that's only because it was such a because it was such a juggernaut for over a decade. And yeah, so Twin Peaks is kind of ushering out the old that everyone had been completely comfortable with, and now it's really trying to imprint on something new. Okay, so we've looked at how the TV show was made, we've looked at how it did when it aired, and now we're going to look at the Log Lady intro that David Lynch wrote in 1993 for the Bravo network when it was airing in syndication for the first time. And this was essentially supposed to be the final words. So, Margaret says, I play my part on life's stage. I tell what I can to form the perfect answer, but the answer cannot come before all are ready to hear. So I tell what I can to form the perfect answer. Sometimes my anger at the fire is evident. Sometimes it is not anger, really. It may appear as such, but could it be a clue? The fire I speak of is not a kind fire. So breaking it down into some of the pieces, she plays her part on life's stage, which it reminds me of "See You at the Curtain Call" that Cooper talks about in part 17, and like it it sounds kind of meta, like, they all know they're in a TV show, blah blah blah. But Leaf from Same Peaks, y'all, when they did their finale on The Return, um, he said about that scene that that scene is what happens in meditation. Like when you meditate, you can kind of see how it's all flowing outside of yourself, and you get kind of a clearer picture without the perspective of being inside your head. Like you can get outside of your feelings and just see how you're reacting in a more objective manner. So I kind of think that when Lynch uses those terms about, like the play or whatever, it's like these characters are so in touch with the same thing that Lynch is, that they can kind of see themselves outside of themselves. And, maybe he calls it a play, maybe not, but like I feel like it's less about, it's like, hey, we're all TV characters and we don't exist outside of this. And I think it's more just, they can see themselves outside of their own motivations. Margaret goes on with, but answers cannot always come before they're ready to hear. Um, that'll be reflected in the episode with "You're 2 days late," and it's like she tries to make or form a perfect answer, as she says here, um, based around that. I think it's it's less about um, I kind of think it's like, like you can only talk to people about something if they're ready to hear it. It's something kind of along those lines, I think. Um, and then Margaret talks about the anger that she'll see here. It's like it might not actually be anger, but a clue. So that makes me think, fire is there's an intention behind the fire. We'll talk about that a little bit more about what she thinks of as fire. Um, but I kind of wonder that, it's like okay, so here she says, the fire I speak of is not a kind fire. So that's definitely denoting that she's talking about the darkness or the more negative aspects of fire. Um, but as far as the anger, like, could it be a clue instead of actual anger? Like, I kind of wonder if that's Lynch's way to retool Frost's writing of Margaret, because in this episode, Cooper is crankier. He's like um, more part of himself. Like, he's experiencing the world through his own brain, and like he holds the dictaphone up to the ceiling to say, like, can you hear that about the Icelanders? So he's a little crabby. And Margaret's kind of crabby too here. She's like, oh, the fish aren't running, and all these other things. She's she's a little crabby here, and I kind of wonder if that's more of a Frost thing than a Lynch thing. And this intro is kind of a way to like reframe that. Um, Margaret should be written from the outside rather than her seeing things from the inside. Yeah, so again, it's kind of a meditation-y style way of life that um, Lynch has that Frost doesn't have as much, even though Frost is definitely into meditation and everything. He more breaks it down in a Jungian kind of way, and Lynch just kind of does his thing the way he does it. And I don't know, it makes me remember how my wayward co-host L would talk about how Frost is an architect and Lynch is a gardener, and it's just more of a style of how they are. And Frost, he'll come in and like he'll build the scripts, and he'll work from that. Whereas Lynch, he'll just like plant these things and then be absolutely tickled at what they grow into. Okay, so we are at that point of the episode where we start actually looking into the scenes of the episode that we're looking at. And we're going to look at it through the point of view of we now know everything from every episode of Twin Peaks from 1990 all the way through 2017. And we can kind of see the overall reality of the show mythology and everything else. And we are definitely going to start with Margaret since we've already halfway gotten there anyway. So the scene at Margaret's cabin is the longest, and as I've said, it's the longest of her scenes in the whole series, and it's essentially us meeting her for the first time. And the first thing we do is we come up on her mysterious cabin, which nobody recognizes. Um, is it the Baba Yaga house? The spooky witch, like in the mythology? Not really. I mean, well, Team Diane over at the Diane podcast, they credit the Baba Yaga house to the Palmer house and Sarah Palmer. So it's Margaret has not become that kind of an archetype, and she never will. Where she starts here, it's more like the hermit archetype. Um, you know, the self-isolating, mystical, intelligent of all things mystical. The one who, like, when the hero is on a quest, the hermit is there to join the journey for a little while, impart a lot of wisdom on the main character, and then kind of stay in their house as the heroes move on. And I mean, that's like literally what is happening here. So it's that kind of an archetype. But it's kind of strange because Margaret actually lives in Twin Peaks, so it's kind of hard to pull that off. And yet here she is where nobody knows where she lives. It's like Harry, he's the main lawman. He doesn't know. Doc Hayward doesn't seem to recognize, and Hawk definitely doesn't either. They all draw guns when they're outside of the place, and then the log lady, she just swoops in out of nowhere, almost like the character at the dumpster in Mulholland Drive. She's interesting that you would get someone who lives in the town, but also is just like not part of the town at all. Um, but why is that? I mean, it's like Michael Horse. He does this crazy, like, stereotypical tracking scene where he, like, kneels over uh, a branch and like just like gets an understanding and then points. Just like in the stereotypical movies of the day for the Indian characters. And he totally cracked up the team. But I mean, Hawk has a good relationship with Margaret in season 3, and yet here he doesn't know where she lives, doesn't know seemingly much about her at all. Is it possibly related to the fact that he had to call her on the phone in season 3? Like, is Margaret, like, actually sort of disconnected from the reality around her? um yeah, I mean, I know it was the speed of the plot that made the meeting with her need to happen in this episode. But it's like, why couldn't she have come down to the sheriff's station when her log had information? It's like, why do people have to come to her? And yeah, like, there's a lot of weirdness to, like, is Margaret actually part of this town? Is she part of the same frequency as everybody else? About that dimensionality, I mean, one of the first things she says is they move so slowly when they're not afraid. And it's strange because, like, in season 3 there's a whole bunch of coded language. It's like we see slow movement as a problem. The the Swan Lake music is slowed down so much when the woodsmen are putting Bob and Mr. C back together in part 8. And in part 12, we see super fast songs happen. And, that conga line when the Mitchums and Dougie and the Pink Girls are all bringing that present through the office of Lucky 7 Insurance to Bushnell Mullins, and it's that crazy fast conga line music. It's like fast is usually something associated with the positive. When you can kind of see the whole thing, it's like when you can call yourself a player in the play, it's like you're kind of seeing outside of all that. And fear will make the world move faster than you, which means that if you're in the point of view of things, it'll be all slow. Everything around you will be slow because you're moving faster. But when you're on a love frequency or a positive frequency, the world is moving slower than you, which appears that you're moving faster. And, you get music like the conga line, or you're experiencing the world around you that way. But in this case, them working not from fear makes the world operate more slowly around them, possibly. Like it's sort of connected and sort of not. And it's like if you're experiencing the world through more of a spiritual, mythological way, like Margaret, maybe that's kind of where she's coming from. And then after that, she talks about how, come on, then my log does not judge. And she's like, now that she's scolded the folks outside her house, it's like maybe they are scared a little bit, or they have a little bit of fear, like what in the world is happening? And the log does not judge. It's like, leave the fear. It's like, you may be starting to go that direction, but don't. Please just come in. One thing throughout this scene, Margaret expects manners. She expects you to wait. She expects you to just, she offers cookies and tea, and she says what's there, and Cooper, he's not that interested, but Hawk holds up his hand and he's like, what kind of cookie? It's like he understands that if something is offered, you say thank you. And that's another thing that I really focused on when I've been looking at season 3. There's an article I wrote called Gratitude, Respect, and Compassion in Twin Peaks. And it's basically about when you dig yourself out of the shit, the first thing that everybody does afterwards is you thank the people who helped you, and then you offer compassion to others who are still in their darkness. And it's like you thank people for what they offer, and people who do not thank you and people who do not thank you do not convey respect. And therefore I could see Margaret being kind of annoyed by that. It's like, offer respect, please. And I do know that article focuses on mostly like when you've overcome trauma, you do the following to get out of the darkness. But I associate that heavily with Margaret because in the final dossier, Mark Frost like makes Margaret the spokesperson for that kind of language. So, this is his first time out writing Margaret, and that's his last time out writing Margaret, and it all just kind of goes together, and it ends up feeling all of a piece when you get done with the show. Some other things she says over the course of this is, shut your eyes and they burst into flames. It's like if you close your eyes, you'll burst into flames. I mean, it's like basically I think like if you don't watch where you're going, you don't see what's coming. It's kind of like an unrefined idea about, the white of the eyes and looking away. And then like flames are associated with the devil here. Smoke and fire are associated with flames last time. So like our flames also kind of a side word to fire, or are they the same thing? Um, yeah, I don't know exactly if there's a difference between the fire and the flame here, but it seems like there is. When Margaret says the owls won't see us in here, that's definitely a Frost thing, because he said in Reflections by Brad Dukes that all the owls imagery that came from Frost's own dreams. And it's like in the future they end up being associated with, like Bob in one of Cooper's dreams gets an owl over his face, so it's associated with those kind of characters. And how can't they see in? Well, in later Log Lady intros, you'll notice that the fireplace is all boarded up, so you can't make a fire in the fireplace, therefore the owls can't see in. When she slaps Cooper's hand about, like when he finally decides to be all in on the cookies, he reaches for one without being told he could. She says, "Wait for the tea. The fish aren't running." So like the fish I'm associating with Lynch's, catching the big fish. The fish are the ideas that you can get when you're in that space that's basically like the collective unconscious. And that's kind of like the Jungian term, like where the dream interpretation comes from, and where the universal field of Lynch's all lives. It's like ideas don't run. It's like you have to just go in there and catch them. But when it's associated with wait for the tea, that makes me think of all the alchemy that happens in season 3. And that's not just Frost. I mean, Lynch called the called the box set from 2006 the gold box set, even though gold had nothing to do with Twin Peaks up to that point. It's like turning to gold, all the alchemy kind of things. It's been in Twin Peaks, like even if it's just an instinct. And I mean, literally, putting tea leaves in water and heating it up and changing its state. I mean, that's basically low level alchemy. So, yeah, getting getting scolded for not going with waiting for the process fits right in. Now, one of the first things Margaret says is 2 day, you're 2 days late. And, I kind of feel like that's part of like with the world sped up, slowed down kind of comparison that I was talking about earlier. But it's also like, from a literal point of view, what was 2 days ago? And it was the funeral of Laura Palmer, which was rushed. The delusion of the town. It's like burying the body took precedence over finding the truth. And what would have happened if Albert was allowed to have the body a little bit more? Well, the guys would have had the opportunity to go investigate other things. And maybe they would have come across Margaret's cabin then, and the log would have been able to give them information right away. Kind of changes things. But it's like how Cooper has to wait for the tea to steep. The truth coming out from the log had to wait for Cooper and the guys to steep and be ready for the truth. And that kind of feels like, the fastest way to the truth sometimes might not be a straight line. Sometimes the truth might be 2 days late. And the last plotty kind of detail is that Margaret's husband was a logging man who met the devil in the fire days after the wedding. And Hawk, the very first thing he says after that is, "The woods hold many spirits, doesn't it, Margaret?" So, I mean, that launched 1,000 theories about the log lady's husband being in the log, or being the log. And it's like there's enough circumstantial evidence over the years where Frost and Lynch seem to be in lockstep about that sort of thing, like Josie's spirit being caught in the drawer pull, that kind of thing. But in Twin Peaks Unwrapped, the book and podcast by Ben Durant and Brian Kazaska, Catherine Coulson told them, "I think we hold fast to totems that remind us of the people we love. I wouldn't say that the spirit of him is in the log. I would say that she holds fast to the memory of her dead husband. But really, the log is just a log, and we never answer what morphizes the log. Not a she or a he. It's just a good log, though. So, it's like she doesn't think that, she who got information from Lynch about this character doesn't think that Margaret's husband is in the log, which kind of says to me that it's more of like a tulpa situation, a memory brought to life. I know I've talked about this before, that like, a memory can be brought to life in the form of a tulpa um, based on certain formulas I've been coming up with over the years. And it's 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 a reasonable thing to think that a tulpa could be brought to life and kind of inhabiting the log.
Hey kids, it's Don Shanahan from the Cinephile Hissy Fit, one of the podcasts on the Ruminations Radio Network. If you've been enjoying this show, come listen to Will Johnson and I fight it out over cinema's best and worst on the Cinephile Hissy Fit. Find us and all the great shows over on ruminationsradionetwork.com.
Okay, so in the scene at Margaret's house, Cooper is being fairly impatient about things. And, it's like he's not really totally on board with how things need to roll. But then eventually she does, her Margaret's log does talk about, beat by beat what happens to Laura. And, yeah, so, I mean, he's able to get there. But how else is Cooper operating within the reality of Twin Peaks? And this episode starts off really interesting because he wakes up at 4:30 in the morning to the Icelanders arriving, and they're partying and everything. And he says, once you leave home, you lose almost 100% chance to control your environment. So he's already kind of off about, he's trying to control the situation, so he's on top of his game, and he can't, and he like literally calls that out. So on top of being 2 days late for Margaret's information, he's off his game in this whole episode. He doesn't have time to listen to Audrey. He might have been late for his coffee or something. And it's like instead of hearing that Audrey wants to help his case, he basically says, it's like, aren't you supposed to be in school? And he says, when I was your age, Wednesdays were traditionally a school day. So like he's sort of flirting with her, which is, I mean, it's been an established thing that they flirt at this point. But she says, I can't believe you were ever my age, and he says, I have the pictures to prove it. So things were written down and documented, which is kind of a thing over Twin Peaks in general. But it also like rhymes strangely with how John Justice Wheeler has a picture of Heidi to prove how cute she was in the future, which is just But in this case, I like that Cooper is doing it in a way that it's like there's an age difference between us, Audrey. And yeah. So after that, the next time we see Cooper is over at Jacques' apartment. He seems to know in advance to look up and find the flesh world, and then he gets a little bit more coffee, and he guesses Jacques' blood type. He assumes that it's on Leo's shirt. He assumes that Ronette's P.O. box is registered to Jacques, and he makes a connection that the truck in the flesh world is also Leo Johnson's truck. So he's making all these connections that eventually get proven. It's like Doc Hayward's like, wow, that is, Jacques' blood type is AB negative, all that stuff. So Cooper's kind of connecting to the case again. He finds the picture of Jacques' cabin and connects the drapes and finds that the picture of Laura, that's the other PO box that Jacques is in charge of. He sees that picture of the girl with Waldo and assumes that that's all connected to the picture of the cabin that he sees. When they come across the log lady's cabin, he's turning down pleasantries. He's impatient and grabbing cookies before it's time. The being 2 days late feels like thematically relevant it thematically connecting to how he's low on sleep. It's like he just wants to get to the destination in the picture that he saw, and this isn't the right cabin. And he sort of listens to Hawk that maybe it is, maybe it's not, but eventually that feels like the right thing to do anyway, because he does get the information from the log about Laura's last hours. I almost wonder if Margaret retuned him there, and that like they needed that to get in the right frame of mind to be able to track down where it was that the log described. And the clues come together immediately. The music is in the air, and there's so much music in the air disrupting Cooper, honestly. Like the Icelanders, they were music in the air. That's a negative experience for him. And what'll happen later on with Jerry's speech at the Icelanders party. It's like the music kicks in before he's finished, and then what do you get? You get Leland breaking down right in the middle of everybody. And then here is the spookiest way, because, like in the middle of the forest, it's singing a Julie Cruz song that they home in on. And, it's like once they get there, they find Waldo, they find the twine that's been a clue. They found blood on the floor. They found the poker chips. Harry got the poker chips all out of the cuckoo clock. Everything is coming together exactly the way it needs to. And, it's like Cooper is way further along on his case. He's connected Jacques and Leo and Ronette and Laura, and it's all seemingly coming together. And yet the next time we see him, he's back at the Great Northern, and there's still music in the air. And his room is, his door is open, and it's not looking really good for him. And that's where he finds Audrey in his bed. Per Lesli Linka Glatter in the Artist and DVD commentary, she says, Audrey and Dale were never supposed to get together, but the sexual tension was there. So, she's playing on it like it's not actually the right thing to do. And we get that with how she says, please don't make me leave. And yeah, I think it's time to move on to Audrey. So in this episode, we get a lot of Audrey Horne. She almost seems like, in a way, she almost seems like just as much of a main character here as Cooper is. So at the beginning of this episode, she's all excited to tell Dale about, she wants to be his junior partner in the Laura investigation. It's like, I can totally help out with your case. And he cuts her off and changes her directions. And basically she has to settle for flirting, because it's like that's the only thing he actually lets her do, which keep that in mind with how she ends the episode. The next time we see her, it's like she really wants to be this kind of investigator. She wants to be a girl Friday. And here she is, talking to Emery Battis at the Horne's department store, and he's treating her like a child. It's like we are so happy you want to join the team and blah, blah, blah. And, it's like this tone of voice that, she is obviously this youngster who deserves to be patronized. And she turns the table on him immediately. She goes behind the desk. She does all the power play stuff that her dad does. she's as relentless as her father here. Her plan is going to happen. And then what does she do? She uses her sexuality like a weapon. Um, she'll try the same thing where she'll use her sexuality like a tool with Cooper too. So she gets mixed results overall, but it's like she threatens to say that Emery made a pass at her, and if she doesn't get the position behind the perfume counter that she's demanding. And yeah, so it it kind of like the way that I see Hank in this episode, yet again, Audrey Horne is being paralleled with Hank. The way he grabs Norma in the double R, and it's like he basically gaslights her and gets a job role, and he turns it on, he turns it around so that it works out best for him rather than Norma. Same way that Audrey does, that works out better for her than Emery. This episode, like one of the first scenes, or one of the first act scenes, is Norma calling it quits with Ed. Um, you know, she um she basically hasn't told Hank, and then Ed talks about how he hasn't told Nadine either, and because Nadine's not well, so neither one of them have told their spouses that they want to divorce them. So Norma does one of the most thematically relevant um, monologues, or speeches between those two characters. It's like, maybe that's our trouble, Ed. We never want to hurt anyone. We never just take what we want. There's a part of me that's beginning to think that this is how it is when you get to the end of your life, and then you don't have anything to show for it. And then don't call me not for a while, I love you, Ed. So it's like you get this impression that it's like, even though she's in power, she doesn't get what she wants, which really does parallel her well with Emery here, even though he's a sleazebag. It's opposite ends of the scale, but they're in the same position. Because it's like, sure, Norma gets the day of beauty with Shelley that they talked about the day before. Um, and then, like, what does she get as a reward when they get back to her place of work where she feels the safest? It's like Hank grabs her by the arm and he says, it's like, I don't expect a kiss or anything. And, he says how he wants to earn his way back into her heart. And, that's like Audrey, she wants to work her way up the ladder. And, Hank tells Norma, so where do I start? And she says washing dishes, kind of like how Emery says wrapping. Um, and Hank tells Norma, can I finish my coffee first, boss? And that reminds me of, like, yes, Miss Horne. It's like the Audrey pulls rank, and Hank is pulling rank too by almost forgetting to be polite enough to say boss. It's like neither Hank nor Audrey respect or believe in the title of their boss. And it's so frustrating for Norma, and like so absolutely on point with Audrey and Emery. Now, with the Norma and Hank scene, there's this extra way of talking about the inverted power, because Shelley's watching this happen, and Invitation to Love in the kitchen. It's showing this scene between Montana and Chet, and Chet's supposed to be the one in charge, obviously, and then Montana's like total triumphant villain. He's like, but what does he say? I love how he says it too. He's like, Chetster, you little Fruit Loop, you're done. I just love Invitation to Love. It's so silly. Um, but yeah, so later on after that, Hank reveals his true nature. He's the bigger bad than Leo, just punching him out and everything. And it's just like how we'll see Audrey revealing her true nature at the end, except it's kind of like how Emery and Norma are on different ends of the scale. um, Audrey reveals her truer nature later on with Cooper. But before we can get to that, we have to get through the party scenes with the Icelanders. So at the party, Audrey is observing in the back how she sees Ben and Catherine like going off to have a meeting. And then Audrey goes between the walls again to learn about how, the affair between Ben and Catherine. Whether she knew about it or not. Um, Audrey is loving that she's getting this information. And she's loving that she's getting information on the arson plan, which I don't think ever comes back up. So I think the writers forgot that Audrey knows about that, or that it didn't really matter after all her experience at One Eye Jack. But in this particular scene, Audrey's reacting with laughter. So is it because she has something on her dad that she's learned a secret? Um, per Glatter in the DVD commentary, she said this about Audrey: if she has the secret, she has the power. So, like, yeah, Audrey absolutely believes that now I have real power here, and she just loves it. And before we can talk about the next thing that Audrey sees at the party, it's like Ben and Jerry have been at this setting up all party, and it's like Jerry comes in with a leg of lamb, kind of like a cheese baguette, except this time Ben calls out Jerry about, all the noise complaints. And, it's like he just wants to get to the signing, or he wants to get the Icelanders to sign a contract as soon as possible. He doesn't have time for Jerry's, appetite this time. The other thing they don't have time for at that first scene is when Leland shows up. And it's like Leland is begging here. Like, Ray Wise doesn't know the answer of who killed Laura. Lesli Linka Glatter doesn't know. And Mark Frost does. I mean, assuming he probably does. But everybody here is playing Leland as an absolutely grieving father. He walks in on this meeting and talks about like how he needs something to occupy his mind, and he even says that he's afraid, so he's on this negative frequency. And instead of giving compassion, like you should when you see people in darkness, Ben and Jerry are trying to mask over it. It's like Jerry's closing the doors so that like the Icelanders don't see their crazy lawyer. Uh, it's like they just don't want anything to do with letting Leland be revealed to the Icelanders. It's like they don't need another deal ruined before the money comes in. Yeah, like so Leland is being shut down. And at the party, okay, so the music interrupts Jerry's speech, and Leland starts going, oh, and he's got his hands on his head and everything. And Ben wants Catherine to do something, so like she turns it into this dance craze, and it's like it's absolutely funny in a lot of ways. Looking at it from a they are TV characters kind of way. But if you're looking at it the way Audrey is watching this scene, she's seeing people creating secrets around the pain that Leland is going through. And like this is right after Audrey learns about her own father's shadiness and lack of interest in his family. And it's like from Audrey's point of view here, when she's crying, she's seeing a father who is absolutely destroyed over his lack of his daughter. His daughter was dead, and he's just destroyed by it. And this is something Audrey wants. Glatter said in the commentary again, Audrey has a complete lack of love in her life. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. And it makes sense that after this state of mind, after like knowing that she doesn't have a father who can give her what she needs or what she wants, she goes to the next best thing that she wants, and that's the FBI man who she's absolutely obsessed with right now. And that FBI man didn't want her on the case this morning, shut her down, but then flirted with her. So what does he want? He wants her in that way. That's the way Audrey sees it. she knows that it's not really the best thing to do. And I think she does understand that Cooper thinks the age difference is a problem. But Audrey needs to be reciprocated, and she'll take it any way she can, and she will use her sexuality as a weapon to get what she needs. Um, but her true self is revealed as she goes down this path too. She tries to be the tough woman that she was with Emery, but she can't pull it off because that's not really what she wants here. She wants to be seen, she wants to be understood, she wants to be loved. And she becomes that little girl that Emery was talking to. And it's like, what does she do? She doesn't demand Cooper's time and attention. She says, please don't make me leave. She begs. She knows that Cooper isn't on the frequency that she's on here, but she's hoping that she can fill her hurt with his affections. And being over her head is the true Audrey. So that kind of scene with Audrey, like that, Audrey's arc here kind of has her playing the role of Laura Palmer. She's standing in for Laura again. And I know my wayward co-host Elle, she talks about how the Hornes are all kind of a stand-in for the Palmers. And it's like she tries to embody Laura's work scene. It's like she gets the job that Laura had. She tries to be that kind of even Laura in the sexual kind of way, where Laura worked at One Eye Jacks and everything. It's like Audrey doesn't know that yet, but she's kind of like, she's trying to be Laura without completely understanding that she's trying to be Laura. It's like she wants to have that position that Laura had in her father's life too, because Ben Horne absolutely adored Laura and treated her the way that Audrey should have been focused on. Well, I mean, except for that one way. But anyway, that's probably why Ben was able to give so much affection to Laura rather than Audrey. How else do we see Laura and her presence in this episode? Well, Leland feels the lack of Laura's presence here. And, it makes you wonder if it's the absence of memory. It's like, is it a hole where the memory should be? Is that what Leland is afraid of? Because, sure, he might be feeling guilt here. He might be remembering, don't make me do this in the train car. It's like he does have an understanding of his culpability in all of this, but I'm wondering if that scene at the end of Fire Walk with Me, where Leland brings, where Leland is brought by Bob into the Red Room, that blood that Bob seems to take from Leland and splatter it on the floor. It's like, is that blood the part of Leland that lived through killing Laura? It's like, did Bob essentially give Leland a certain amount of amnesia where like he's not going to remember what happened, and is like not knowing, like, is there a bunch that Leland is not knowing that maybe he suspects things, or like that's where his pain is coming from? I don't know. There's a lot of things with Leland, but I'm giving him credit for being able to be a grieving father here, even though he's just as equally, absolutely guilty. So how else do we see Laura here? Well, she's connected to the P.O. boxes. It's like she has a Flesh World account, and that's been proven. She's tied to Ronette and Waldo and Jacques' cabin and Jacques and Leo. And then Jacques, he's revealed in his apartment scene to be a trucker turned bartender. So, does that make anybody else remember Beulah talking in part 2 of season 3 about a world full of truck drivers? It's like truck drivers, they just haul stuff. They don't know what it is. They don't care what it is. They don't have a home. They drive around in this vehicle, and all they have to do is make sure that the contents are unchanged. It's like they completely lack responsibility for what kind of contents they're transporting. They're a shuttle, they're a middleman, and these are the kind of people that Laura is associating herself with in her final hours. Laura's revealed through James and Donna when they're in the gazebo. James starts out with this horrible sob story of, it's like, my dad's a musician and he ran off, and my mom's an alcoholic, and then she skips town and hooks up with men and blah blah. It's absolutely cheesy, and I know the Twin Peaks rewatch podcast. Those guys are saying, it's like, maybe that was compelling somewhere, but not out of the mouth of that guy, and it just makes me laugh. But it's like this could have been like this really terrible scene between him and Donna, but then he kind of turns it around and says, because he doesn't want any secrets between him and Donna. That's why he told all this stuff. He says, I don't want to have any lies between us. It's the secrets people keep that destroy any chance they have of happiness. And I don't want us to be like that. So, Glatter basically said the same thing in that DVD commentary. But, it's like, it's something that James learned between him and Laura. It's like, maybe if Laura hadn't kept so many secrets, she would still be alive, that kind of stuff. Then he talks to Donna about how they have to figure out what happened to Laura, or it'll never go away their whole life, which really matches well with, getting through your trauma. And then he takes this extra leap, where James says, she's out there wandering like a restless spirit, and then Donna says, I feel it too. But I tell you what, this is the smartest and most intuitive James will ever be in this show. Like, he'll be pretty close in Fire Walk with Me because Lynch gets him, but I don't see any other time that James will be as in touch with things as he is right here. And then, like, literally calling her a restless spirit is just, it's nice. And where can that restless spirit go? Possibly to Maddie, who basically at the end of the episode talks about how Laura had a hiding place where she hid her cigarettes and stuff, which, proves that Laura, she wasn't just into drugs recently. She seems to have been smoking for a very long time. But yeah, Laura hides cassettes in a giant red box somehow in a bedpost. And so like Maddie was able to find the words. But before that, she actually comes into the Double R to meet up with James and Donna. And she introduces herself to Donna, which is really strange because she was there serving people coffee in that one scene when Donna was watching Sarah describing Bob to Andy, who was sketching it. So they've met, which is kind of odd. I'm assuming that's just like a writers forgot something, and it was just something that got lost from a production side. But here it's just really, really disconcerting. So she ends up getting a pitch from James and Donna that they want to take their investigation to the next level because nobody loved her but us, and like we know things and we want to find out who killed Laura. So Maddie agrees. She says, I'll help you. And right before that, she's like lifting the glasses off her face, so she looks even more like Laura when she agrees to helping. And it's like, yeah, then she calls up Donna and gives the information about the bring a tape recorder, we found thing. And like the whole of it is that she has connections to Laura. She's got, she probably has the spooky dreams too, but she had a feeling that the day before Laura died that Laura was in trouble. And as they're leaving the diner, she says, I didn't really know her that well, but I feel like I do. My folks were always telling us how much alike we were. So, like, she's connected at a base level with Laura without knowing any of the details. It's like basically, it seems like they're almost prepping her for the thematic possession of a sorts by a ghost who's out there wandering like a restless spirit. It's like they're letting Maddie um, get captured by the spirit of Laura. And the last person who really reveals Laura is Bobby. After the family session with Jacoby turns into a one-on-one between Bobby and Jacoby, um, it's revealed that Bobby cried the first time they had sex, and Laura laughed at him. So it's like Laura kind of wanted to break his spirit. um, Also, it comes out that Laura wanted to die. Um, per Bobby, she said people try to be good, but they're really sick and rotten, her most of all. And every time she tried to make the world a better place, something terrible would come up inside her and pulled her back into hell. And that's something that would come up inside her reminds me of how like she gets that black and white kabuki face when she's talking to Harold in Fire Walk with Me, where she says Fire Walk with Me, and then she says me, and like that really Bob possessed style way. And it's like we know Bob writes through her in the diary, and talks about in like when she's under the ceiling fan in Firewalk with Me, it's like I want to taste through your mouth, that kind of stuff. So like that's the darkness that I feel is coming up through her, according to what Bobby is saying, except he just doesn't know it by that kind of metaphysical way. So like that's sort of there already. Um, and then the detail that she forced Bobby to sell drugs so that she could have them. So I mean, this episode has to be what Mark Frost gave Jennifer Lynch before she wrote the diary over the summer. Um, it's like this was definitely done before the diary was even a possibility because the merchandising didn't come up until after the pilot did so well. So this was a Frost creation, which was pretty neat to know. Um, I mean, it's absolutely terrible for Bobby, but I mean, it's amazing character work. So yeah, we get to know that kind of stuff about Laura. Like she initiated the drug side of things. Um, And then, later on, we get her final night described moment by moment by Margaret's log in like a poetry kind of way. And then when Cooper and the gang make it to Jacques' cabin, it's illustrated by like physical evidence that completely backs up what the log said. So it is said aloud now, and then it becomes physical. So we get a whole bunch of information on how Laura lived in the town and at what levels she lived at the town. So that's about all we get with Laura, but I want to double back and go into what we learn about Bobby too. Because, it's like Bobby reveals a lot about Laura, but what does he reveal about himself too? In the first scene we see with him, it's all, sexy time with Shelley, and it's like they're doing all these goofy scenarios about, it's like, hey Leo, it's like, how are you? It's like, oh, what's this, a gun? It's like basically, it's like stop treating Shelley like that. It's like they're going through the scenario like it's gonna be really easy to take care of their Leo problem. Um it's like they obviously by the end, Shelley completely learns that it's an absolutely real situation. And, it's like she has to close her eyes and shoot. And like she's crying when she does it. She can't even look at Leo when she actually does shoot him. So it's kind of like how Leo, I mean, not Leo. It's kind of like how Bobby here, he can talk the big talk and everything, but like he doesn't really remember how serious it was with Laura. until Jacoby talks to him. So at the beginning of the Jacoby scene, he's lying down next to, his parents. They're the camera is going back and forth, almost like a sitcom kind of thing. It's like Bobby's doing this, he's doing this too, he's doing this. It's like all the behavior issues that he's having. Um, and then we pan out and we see him kind of lying down, almost like he's trying to sneak away in a dream or something. Very thematic. He's even yawning. It's like, oh, it's just too much. Jacoby asks him, "Do you use drugs?" And then he says, "No," which is obviously a lie. But his parents call him out on drinking, and he's like, "Everybody drinks." So it's like the spirit of the question, illicit things only. It's like he doesn't want to do the literal answer for his parents, and he's not going to do the real answer right then either. But he's also like, in a way, he is sort of a realist. It's like, "Are you unhappy, Bobby?" Jacoby asks him that, and Bobby says, "Shouldn't I be?" It's like, obviously there's enough going on that he's a realist in this way. And then a really interesting question. He asks Jacoby, "Have you ever killed anybody?" And nobody answers yes or no. The Jacoby, pushes it back at him. It's like, "Have you?" And then Bobby doesn't answer. He just says, "My father has." And it's like they get as far as, it's like that was during wartime, and his mom says that's different, and he says, "Different from what?" And it's interesting because, like, it seems like he's really just trying to make a connection with his father, because it's like he did kill that guy in the forest. It's like in the diary they make it seem like he might have killed a drug dealer in Lowtown. It's like he has this unspoken truth about him that's like right on the surface. It's been mentioned enough where you can make the implication, but it's as said as Ben Horne being Donna's father, like at the end of the series. Nobody ever actually says that that's the case in words. And, it's like just here, it's like Bobby is trying to make some kind of common ground between him and his dad, who he just does not understand. And that pretty much stops there. And Jacoby basically, says, it's like, "Okay, I'm going to do a one-on-one with Bobby now. And, we'll do one-on-one with the whole family," which, gets the family out of there. But, then he's like, "Let's cut the crap, Bobby, so your parents don't know what you're going through. Let's talk about Laura." So, it's like, is Jacoby actually interested in Bobby? Not necessarily. It's like this is where Jacoby gets in his gets on Bobby about, it's like, "What happened the first time you made love? Did you cry?" And Bobby gets up and gets in his face. He's like, "What?" And doing the whole bravado thing. But then Jacoby uses more information that he shouldn't use, privileged information from Laura. And he says, "And then what did she do? Did she laugh at you?" Which makes Bobby turn away completely. And he does not make eye contact with Jacoby in the entire rest of this scene from this point forward. It's like Bobby is absolutely in that moment again when he was humiliated by Laura. It's like Jacoby asks him, "Were you very sad when Laura died?" And this is when Bobby says Laura wanted to die. And it's like, "How did you know that?" "Because she told me." And it's like there's this thing where Jacoby asks Bobby in like a series of progressive questions. It's like, "She was harboring an awful secret bad enough that she wanted to die because of it?" And Bobby says, "Yes." "Enough that it drove her to consciously find people's weaknesses and prey on them?" "Yes." "Tempt them, break them down?" "Yes." "Make them do terrible, degrading things?" "Yes." "Laura wanted to corrupt people because that's how she felt about herself?" "Yes." And you can kind of see that as Bobby said yes to Laura, progressively over time, he would say yes to Laura as she progressed to degrade him more and more. He tells Jacoby, she wanted so much. She made me sell drugs so she could have them. So, and this is when the Laura theme music is like highly kicked into gear too. And it's just like soaring that all this truth that Bobby is able to reveal finally. And, it's like well, Ali Sharaba's article, I've mentioned this before, but the one Bobby Briggs and Laura Palmer, A Love Story, she says how he went from being kind and gentle and in touch with his emotions into someone who Laura could completely control, and control was something she desperately needed to feel. And yeah, so I mean, she needed to control things because of how Bob was trying to control her. And she needed some aspect of her life that she could work with and that she could handle. And because that's how part of Bob's abuse affected her, that means that even if it's only by proxy, that Bobby Briggs is also another victim of Bob. But here at this point in the show, we only know for sure that Bobby is a victim of Laura. And I don't know. I mean, for anybody keeping track, it's like, sure, he had the outburst at the funeral where he talked about everybody's culpability, but this is the first time I think that Bobby was ever able to speak out loud that what was happening between him and Laura. I don't think he told anybody else about this. I mean, I can guarantee you he never told Mike Nelson. I mean, probably never told Leo. All this stuff. It's like I kind of think that this was him finally confronting his truth, and in a lot of ways, like when you're turning into a person who can become that good lawman like he is in season 3, this is his first coat on the golden shovel, golden shovel, 2 coats. And that intrapersonal alchemy that Jacoby talks about in the future after he straightens himself out and becomes less of a selfish idiot than he is here in this scene with Bobby. This is, I think this is a turning point where Bobby is able to see what the problem is, and then over time, he'll be able to do enough that the next time he recognizes this about himself, he'll be able to do something about it and become a better person. Well, I think at this point, to go any further would be to go into the next episode. So, you have been listening to the Blue Rose Task Force podcast, a production of Ruminations Radio Network and TV Obsessive. If you resonate with what you're hearing, please subscribe, rate, and review our show, and we would love to connect with you on Twitter at Blue Rose TF Pod and Instagram and Facebook at Blue Rose Task Force. You can find me at JPB_Littlegreen on Twitter and John_the_Peaky on Instagram. Visit ruminationsradionetwork.com for additional great shows such as Oh God It Hurts, and that's the unit of measure hertz, HZ, and 25 Yards Later, and find any number of classic 25YL Twin Peaks articles and content on many other TV shows at tvobsessive.com. If you want to be part of our monthly mailbag Patreon episodes, send your burning questions and passionate feedback to Blue Rose Task Force Podcast at gmail.com, and we'll see you next week as we cover episode 6, the 7th overall episode of Twin Peaks. Until then, listeners, I'll see you in my dreams.
It's a way to kind of deepen and expand the universe that the show takes place in. They'll really dig it. This is a gift to all the fans.